Hello, my name is Susan Baumgaertel, and I've been asked to share why I went into medicine. So pull up a chair and listen to my story because, of course, everything with me is a story. So there were no physicians in my family before me. I didn't follow in anyone's shoes. And I actually, originally from Seattle, I grew up in Ontario, Canada, and we had grade 13 back then, so that was kind of an extra year before college. I came back to the University of Washington, and I don't know exactly when I started to think about medicine as a career, but I had a lot of early influencers. And one thing I actually enjoyed was volunteering on campus. And at that time, in the mid 80s, there was an organization called the Disabled Student Services. And I volunteered my time for several quarters helping a vision-impaired grad student work on her thesis. And oh my gosh, remember that was back in the day before personal computers. So you'd walk into this gorgeous, ancient library and you'd go to the card catalog, and I would have to research all these books and find the books for her. And then we would walk back with her seeing eye dog to her tiny little office. And I would actually read passages out of books. These were psychology books, as she transcribed using her Braille or her Braille machine. So she would make notes. Quite an experience and quite fascinating to help her. So I really was interested in helping people, and so the field of medicine seemed like a natural extension of that. But I was just really torn over what to major in college. And I actually majored in architecture and urban planning. And that really came from a wonderful high school class I had in house design. I had won a Nashua of Canada award. And so it just kind of all percolated, and I thought, gosh, I should do architecture, which was a fascinating journey and challenging in so many ways. One of my favorite memories, maybe not favorite then, is what they call a design charette. And the charette is actually a French word for cart, and it's said to originate from the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris during the 19th century. And that's apparently the proctors would circulate a cart, horse-pulled cart, or a charrette, to collect the final drawings, and students would be frantically working and putting the finishing touches on their work. That sounds really pretty risque and historical, but this intense design period in art and architecture really is a thing, and it would last for a week, sometimes more, and it would be this intense, like, day and night work on a project, kind of analogous to being on call, right? Like inpatient hospital rotations. So that was kind of my little segue when I got my med school interview. But one thing I did was we had a project where we had to design a pavilion for an imaginary future World's Fair. And you could base it on any organization. And I was very interested in cancer, not sure why, that kind of just was in the forefront. And so I became interested in learning about our local, national, international, highly acclaimed institution. Back then it was called Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, so FHCRC. So I attended an open house, a whole story in its own. In fact, that led me to meet my then future husband, so good story. But I designed a pavilion to represent this institution. And, we had to really make do with scrapping around for materials. You couldn't just order anything on Amazon, that didn't exist. And so I'll just never forget, I was so proud of the fact that I had this tent part, the roof, this very complicated design that I did for the model. And I used pantyhose, oh my gosh, with like a pole in the middle, like a tent pole. And then to cover the pantyhose and make it a solid material, I used a gesso. And gesso is, for many people who are artists, is a kind of a white paste that kind of you put over a canvas before you do a painting on it, or an oil painting. So I gessoed this pantyhose, and of course it looked like this amazing tent material. It won first place. It was really kind of cool. No idea where that project went, but it was a good memory. And so I then volunteered at Fred Hutch Cancer Center and helped to develop what they called the Therapeutic Arts Program, TAP. And that was doing art with kids who were going through the bone marrow transplants. And remember back then, this was in the era of the laminar airflow rooms, and you had to like take 20 minutes to kind of, walk into the space and do all your sterile cleansing and change and gown up and then walk into the actual room. I mean, it was arduous to bring art supplies and do art with these kids and then kind of do the same thing in reverse. And actually, in one of my architecture classes, I designed a theoretical wing for a cancer inpatient floor. And so that kind of got the top grade there too. But, I was always straddling these two worlds, and I remember being in my med school interview, it was like, they said, why architecture? And I remember being in the architecture program as a top student. They said, why medicine? And so I always felt like I was ping-ponging, but I wanted to do both. And I've really always blended art and science together. It's kind of in me. Mother was an artist. So I started medical school with a focus on cancer. I did a research project. It was wonderful. But I had a wonderful mentor in internal medicine. And so that cancer care folded really into how I cared for all of my patients, not just cancer patients. And I didn't get in the primary care tract when I got into residency, internal medicine. It was, I think, the second year they were doing primary care. This is kind of brand new. But I had, I think, a more rigorous experience, more depth and breadth of all sorts of inpatient medicine in my traditional tract. And so, to be honest, I think it made me a better physician, a better primary care physician. So, in fact, interestingly, almost all of my fellow residents in the primary care tract eventually went into specialty medicine, but I stayed true to my calling. And to this day, I still look at the whole person as I care for people beyond primary care in my telemedicine practice, my MD advocate. So there's your story, and I hope you enjoyed it.